Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Eyes wide open. The sun hung low in the sky, casting shadows over the cemetery. It was a beautiful day for a funeral. Mourners gathered at the top of the hill, circling the open coffin to say their last goodbyes, as Donna Herman had passed, or so they thought. Her family, dressed in black, stood closest to the coffin. Blurry shapes hovered above her. Muted voices drifted through the thick fog of her mind. Distant, yet familiar. Donna Herman wanted to scream. She could see them. Her children, her grandchildren, her so-called loved ones, standing around her, dressed in black, murmuring their final goodbyes. The sky loomed somewhere beyond them, pale and streaked with the fading sun. The coffin beneath her was lined with silk and covered in a thick scent of lilies. In the words of the pastor beside her, she was dead, but she wasn't. She was right there. She could hear them. She could see them. Panic surged through her, slamming against the walls of her motionless body. She tried to move, to twitch a finger, to part her lips, to scream, but nothing obeyed. She was trapped in her own body. Frank was the first to give the eulogy. He was Donna's first son, her golden child. As he spoke, his younger brother, Josh, stared silently at their mother's body. Even in death, the old woman refused to rest. He remembered the doctor's remark that no matter what they tried, his mother's eyes wouldn't shut. They had asked him if he wanted to sew them shut, but he couldn't bring himself to do it, and neither could his elder brother or younger sister. "Are you Joshua Herman?" Josh blinked, snapping out of his thoughts and turning to the source of the voice on his left. "Oh, just Josh, sir," he said, clearing his throat. Two men in black suits stood before him, wearing sunglasses and carrying an aura of authority. The one on the left spoke first. "Nice to meet you, Josh. I'm Detective Foreman, and this is my partner, Detective Davis," he said, extending a hand. Josh shook it. "Thanks for coming out here. I didn't know what else to do." "You did the right thing by calling the police," said Detective Davis. "We'll investigate this matter thoroughly." Josh offered them an awkward nod as he noticed his brother's speech was about to come to an end. "I'll speak with you after the funeral," he said, before walking up to the podium to give his own speech. The detectives stuck around, speaking to everyone who seemed like a person of interest. "She was like a mother to me," cried Cheryl Herman, Frank Herman's wife. She clutched tightly to her tissues, crocodile tears sliding endlessly down her cheeks. Her husband comforted her by rubbing her shoulder, but he too was too distraught to be questioned properly. Josh's wife, Celia Herman, had a lot to say about the entire family. She grumbled about how much Josh had suffered due to his and his mother's disagreements over his marriage. "We haven't been over in a while," she muttered. "I only know that Frank and Millie were the ones in charge of her care after we left the house." "Can you tell us more about Frank and Millie?" Detective Davis asked. "Sure thing," Celia said. She turned to the boy sitting on her lap. "Won't you go to Daddy now? His speech is about to end." She ushered away what looked to be a 5-year-old boy, the spitting image of Josh Herman. Once he was gone, she reached into her purse, pulling out a cigarette and lighting it. "What would you like to know?" she said, blowing out a cloud of smoke. Detective Foreman coughed. "Anything you could tell us that you think is relevant will do," he said, waving the smoke away from his face. Celia took a long drag before she spoke. "Frank is the golden child, you know. He can do no wrong in that old bag's eyes. Even though Josh has been the one keeping the business afloat, Frank has always gotten all of the credit. And Millie," she exhaled slowly, tapping the ashes off the side of her chair. "Well, Millie's got her own issues. Dating a scumbag like Cameron. What was your and your husband's relationship like with the deceased before she passed?" Detective Davis asked. Celia sighed and pressed the cigarette into the armrest beside her. "I haven't spoken to that woman or set foot in her house since she called me a gold-digging whore the day I gave birth to Gabe," she said bitterly. "Josh always tried to keep the peace, though. He spoke to her as often as a son should." Detective Davis nodded, jotting down notes. "Right. Thank you, Mrs. Herman. We'll contact you if we have any further questions." He exchanged a few quiet words with his partner, and the two detectives split off into the crowd. Detective Foreman found Cameron lingering near the back of the gathering, hands shoved into his pockets, rocking slightly on his heels. Unlike the rest of the family, he didn't appear grief-stricken. If anything, he looked bored. "Cameron, right?" Foreman asked, pulling out his notebook. "Yeah." Cameron barely glanced at him. "How long have you been with Millie Herman? A couple of years?" "Nothing serious." Cameron shrugged. "Look, man, I don't know what you expect me to say. The old bag hated me, wouldn't even let me within 10 feet of the mansion." Foreman raised a brow. "Why didn't she like you?" "I'm a DJ," Cameron said flatly. "You think Donna Herman would have wanted her goody-two-shoes daughter with someone like me?" He flicked his gaze toward the casket, his lip curling slightly. "Not that it matters now." At the same time, Detective Davis approached two well-dressed men standing slightly apart from the family. Julio Hernandez, a longtime business associate of Donna's, and Ben Handover, her lawyer. "Mr. Hernes, Mr. Handover," Davis greeted. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Julio adjusted his cufflinks. "Of course, Detective, though I don't know what else to say. Donna's death was unexpected." Ben let out a sigh. Truly unexpected. There was still so much to be done before he stopped himself. Davis caught the hesitation, his grip tightening on his notepad. "Before what?" Ben hesitated, lowering his voice. "Before she finalized the changes to her will." Davis's brow lifted. "What changes?" She mentioned wanting to reassess her assets and how they would be distributed. But she fell into a coma before anything was made official. Julio cut in smoothly. "Donna was very careful with her affairs. It's a shame she never got the chance to put her final wishes into writing." Davis absorbed the information. A sudden death right before a change to a will? That was a clear motive for murder. But who in the Herman family would have wanted Donna gone before she could make those changes? His gaze shifted to the nearby staff. Anne, Donna's longtime maid, stood with red-rimmed eyes, clutching a handkerchief. Beside her, Carlos, the butler, remained stoic, his expression unreadable. Davis approached them. "Did either of you notice anything unusual in the days leading up to Mrs. Herman's passing?" Anne sniffled. She was in a coma, but she was showing signs of improvement. I never thought." She shook her head, unable to continue through the sobs. Carlos cleared his throat. "There were tensions, sir. Madame Herman's children didn't see eye to eye when it came to her care." His eyes flickered toward Frank, Cheryl, and Millie. Frank and Cheryl insisted she remain at home. Millie argued she'd be better off in a care facility. Davis frowned. Cheryl was involved in Donna's care? Carlos hesitated before nodding. More than involved. She handled everything with the doctor. He wasn't just hired for Donna. He's been treating Cheryl's family for years. Davis narrowed his eyes. That was a detail worth investigating. Donna fought harder to be able to move, but her body would not listen. She knew who had harmed her. She could tell them herself if she could just speak. Desperation clawed at her. And somehow, she forced her eyes to shift, darting around in search of anyone who noticed. And someone did. Gabe, the little boy's breath hitched. He didn't understand death. Not fully. He didn't like funerals, didn't like the way Grandma looked in the coffin, and he certainly didn't understand why, if she was supposed to be asleep forever. She had just blinked at him. "Mommy?" His voice trembled. "Mommy, Grandma's eyes are moving." Silence, then a soft chuckle. "Oh, sweetheart," Celia cooed, smoothing down his hair. "That's just your imagination, honey. Grandma's asleep." "No, no, no!" Donna screamed inside her mind. "I'm here! I'm still here!" A new voice, warm and honeyed, drifted over the murmurs. Children and their wild imaginations, right? Donna's blood ran colder than the silk beneath her. Cheryl, the woman who had put her here, the woman who had killed her, and no one would ever know. One by one, her family members approached to place flowers on her coffin. Some averted their eyes, others kept them tightly shut. No one dared to look at her face, and no matter how hard she tried to flicker her gaze, no one noticed. Then, the last one stepped forward. Cheryl, Donna's blood boiled beneath her frozen skin. Cheryl smiled sweetly, crocodile tears welling in her eyes as she spoke about family, about bonds that could never be broken. Then she leaned down, her lips brushing against Donna's ear. "I know you're still in there." She pulled back just enough to meet Donna's unblinking stare, a serene expression settling over her face. One hand caressed Donna's cheek, as if in mourning. "Don't you worry." Cheryl's words seeped down her ear like a searing poison. "I'll have Frank join you as soon as the inheritance comes through." The above story ends, but the suspense and thrill have never stopped. Right here is another equally interesting story. Please continue listening. Death of the Lilacs. I never should have opened that letter. But from the moment my fingers brushed the aged paper, thin and fragile, it seduced me. It all started on estate sale day. On any other Thursday, I would wake up crazy excited, strip out of my cotton PJs, and swap them for jeans and my gray V-neck, the one with vintage across the chest in fading white vinyl. I would appreciate the scent of the fresh lilacs that had just bloomed outside my window, their enchanting aroma drifting in as a passenger on the early morning breeze. Then I'd head out for a long, adventurous day of treasure hunting. There's something magical about rescuing a forgotten piece of furniture or trinket. It drives me, knowing that each piece will start a new life, absorbing new memories. It is intoxicating. But that Thursday, I woke up with an uneasy feeling that I immediately brushed off, assuming it was residual bad dream funk. Through my vintage lace curtains, I could see evidence of a cloudy day, doing nothing to brighten my spirit or improve my mood. And then there were the lilacs. This morning, their fragrance was thick, overpowering, and instantly turned my stomach. With an irritated mumble, I reached over and slid the window shut with a sharp thud. Pulling the blanket over my head, I heavily considered going back to sleep. However, 15 minutes later, I was dressed and headed out the door. Unheard of for me. It was as if I had somewhere urgent to be, but when I checked my calendar app, there was nothing booked. As I locked the door behind me, the heavy scent of the lilacs filled the air, overbearing and inescapable. They had sprung up from out of nowhere just a few weeks ago, their soft purple and white blossoms spilling over the wooden railing of my front porch. At first, I welcomed them, admired them. But now they felt invasive, their presence needling at my already fraying mood. I had been at the first sale of the day for about half an hour, and it seemed like a bust. After wandering from room to room, sifting through boxes and stacked containers of someone else's memories, I was just about ready to head to the next stop on my Google Maps list. As I stepped into the kitchen, I suddenly lost my balance and grabbed the long slab of butcher block countertop to steady myself. Instantly, my senses were overwhelmed. Years of long-forgotten Sunday morning breakfasts, afternoon bread proofs, and late-night Christmas cookie bakes. The heavy scent of bacon and coffee made me dizzy and hungry at the same time. I heard a child laughing and turned to see a little girl hiding her giggles behind a cupped hand as she pointed at Tom, chasing Jerry across the flickering screen of an old tube TV. Then a scream rang out, sharp and raw, echoing into my soul, almost as if it came from within. As I released my grip on the countertop, I spun around to see what had happened. Instantly, everything changed. The warm scents of breakfast were gone. The little girl, gone. The TV wasn't even plugged in, its frayed cord hanging eerily off to the side. It was just the humdrum sound of a normal estate sale, with people milling about and haggling the cashier with lower price offers. I just stood still, trying to breathe and make sense of what had just happened. Before I could grasp any ounce of stability, a sudden ding from the oven sent me nearly jumping out of my own skin. I bolted past the cashier and straight for the front door. "Edith," I stopped. My feet, my heart, and my breath. Everything just stopped. My body turned and drifted past the "Watch Your Step" sign as I felt pulled down the wooden steps into the garage. It sat still, empty of people, empty of life, yet oddly full of the scent of lilacs. Why couldn't I escape it? I hadn't been in this room yet. I had peeked inside earlier, but it seemed full of things I usually ignored. Pesticides, old mulch, motor oil, nothing that belonged in an antique booth. Yet here I was, drowning in the scent of lilacs with not a bloom in sight. Why had I come? I wanted to leave. All at once, sunlight pushed its way through the clear glass windows of the garage door, spilling onto a small, frail woman seated at the desk in front of me. The same desk that, just seconds before, had been buried beneath years of dust and piled high with empty boxes. An old ladder leaning against one side. All of that was gone now, and I could smell breakfast again. "Edith, I work all day to put food on this table. You think it's gonna cook itself?" The dark voice boomed behind me. I flinched, but couldn't tear my eyes from her. The woman turned and looked right at me. And then, after just a second of recognition, right through me. She turned back to the desk, and in a swift, almost frantic motion, shoved a piece of paper into an envelope. I heard her whispering something, but the words were too soft to make out. "Damn it, woman, where are you?" came the voice from the top of the stairs. My instinct was to spin around, to see him, but my eyes stayed fixed on Edith. She was facing me now, her gaze moving down the staircase as he came down. "You know better than to keep me waiting," he said, his words rolling down the back of my neck like sap oozing from a wounded sweet gum tree. I resisted the urge to wipe it away. Edith slid her trembling hands into her apron. Her gray eyes hovered just above my head, steady in his direction. Slowly, her shoulders curled back, pushing her tiny frame to stand tall. Her chin lifted just enough to prove her fortitude. But the slow rise and fall of her chest wasn't from resolve. It was control, each breath measured to contain her emotions. "Yes, I'm sorry. I should have been more mindful of your time. The bacon's on now. I'll have breakfast ready in just a few minutes." I could feel his heat standing uncomfortably close behind me. The hair on the back of my neck lifted with each of his heavy breaths as he considered his reply. Finally, he muttered, "You'd better." The sound of his heavy boots grew lighter as he moved toward the stairs. Her eyes were back on me, not through me. She stood still for a moment, as if thinking something through. Then, as if she had made her decision, she turned toward the desk and opened the top left drawer. She looked at me again, then down at the drawer. I followed her gaze. With a careful hand, she slid the bottom of the drawer back, pulled the envelope from her apron pocket, placed it in the hollow space, and closed the drawer. Her gaze shifted to me once more, her eyes trying to tell me a story, calling my name. Her mouth opened, her expression full of apology, but no words came. As she took a step forward, the sunlight caught the iridescent trail of a single tear that had run down her cheek. My heart hurt for her. All at once, she was gone. The sun had vanished. The windows on the garage door had been painted over years ago. The acrid smell of gasoline, oil, and pesticides flooding my nose once again. I gasped and wiped my face, realizing that I, too, had tears streaming down my cheeks. I took a few steps toward the desk, my eyes locked on the drawer. My pulse quickened as I reached out to pull it open. "Miss, do you need help?" came a tiny voice from the top of the stairs. I jumped and screamed. Then she screamed. With our hands over our chests, we both burst into laughter. "I am so sorry, doll. I didn't mean to startle you. It's totally okay. I was in my own world." I took a deep, slow breath, in and out. "Actually, yes. I would like some help. I'm interested in this desk, but I don't see a price on it, I said, pointing to the spot where the woman had just been sitting. Oh, that old thing is junk, honey. One of the drawers is stuck, and it's missing a leg. She turned to head back through the door. I looked at the desk, then back at her. All the same, I'd love to take it off your hands. Would you take 20 for it? She stopped and turned around. Her expression shifted. I could see the dollar signs in her eyes and a slight hint of a smirk on her lips. Then, just as quickly, it changed again to a look of faux concern. Well, that did belong to the homeowner, and I am trying to get the family top dollar. I couldn't possibly let it go for $20, but I imagine they'd be okay with $50. Does that work for you? $20 is usually my price point for old furniture. $20 and little to no damage, other than age. But she was asking $50, and it would need extensive repairs. Not that I was buying it for resale anyway. Honestly, I felt like I was out of mind when I agreed. But the next thing out of my mouth was, sure, 50 is great. Can I have someone pick it up in an hour? Well now, that would be lovely. The edges of the woman's mouth curled into a slow, knowing grin, full of satisfaction, like a cat licking cream from its whiskers. 4 hours, 3 stops, and 2 cups of Java later. I was back home, where Jeff, my boyfriend, not boyfriend, was waiting in front of my driveway with the desk. Sadie, what were you thinking? This is a piece of junk. Please tell me you got it for free? He grumbled as I slid out of my Jeep. He leaned against the bed of his truck, arms folded, looking cute, but not happy. Oh, come on. You can see it has great bones, I said, resting my hand on the side of his face as I stood on my tiptoes and gave him a light kiss. He looked into my eyes, sighed, and wrapped his arms around me. You owe me. I smiled. Okay, where do you want this thing? Back porch, please. Why don't you go make us something to eat while I do your dirty work? You got it, I said with a wink. As I walked up the sidewalk, my stomach sank. The lilacs, so full and lush just hours ago, were dead. Their once vibrant petals had shriveled, decay clinging to them, burnishing the edges with shadow. Even though it felt morbid, I reached out to brush one with my fingertip. It crumbled to dust, carried away on the wind. I had enjoyed them while they lasted, until this morning. Now, an ominous feeling settled in my chest, hauntingly familiar, though I couldn't understand why. The scent had been overwhelming earlier, almost stifling, and while I didn't necessarily want them back, their sudden decay felt oddly personal. 10 minutes later, we sat on the back patio, eating lunch and staring at the desk. I debated whether I should tell him about what I had experienced earlier. We had been seeing each other for about 6 months, and things were going mostly okay. He didn't want to put a label on things, which felt like a little bit of a red flag. But I wanted to see where things went a little longer. He had some great qualities. Only time would tell if they outweighed the rest. I really did want things to progress between us. And they say communication is key. So I decided to tell him. As I told him the story, he ate his chicken salad sandwich and slurped his lemonade, his eyes fixed on me, except for the occasional glance at the desk. When my story was over, he wiped his mouth with one of my daisy-covered napkins, downed the rest of his lemonade, and said, "Well then, let's get this drawer open." He made quick work of the stuck drawer, and after searching for only a second, found the notch that slid back the false bottom. I couldn't believe it. The false bottom alone was a stretch, but seeing the letter sitting there in real life, insane. I reached into the drawer and picked up the envelope, my hands trembling just as Edith's had, but for different reasons. The paper was aged, its edges rough and slightly brittle. I turned it over, lifted the flap, and slowly pulled out the lilac-colored paper, careful not to damage it. Hauntingly beautiful. It was clearly handmade, bits of lilac petals pressed between its uneven fibers. Should I open it? I glanced at Jeff. He shrugged. "That's up to you." I wasn't sure. Edith's eyes had been haunted, and while part of me felt like I was meant to open the letter, another part couldn't shake the sadness in her eyes. It lingered, heavy and unsettling. Still, something pulled at me, urging me to open it. Before I even realized what I was doing, I unfolded the letter, top first, then bottom. One single line stretched across the middle of the page. "I wanted to warn you. I was trapped. I am sorry." I read the line again. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I could smell bacon. The room was spinning. My stomach was sick. Somewhere in the distance, Jeff was calling my name, but it was faint, muffled. The air was thick, damp and dank, clinging to my skin like old mildewed laundry left to long in the wash. I couldn't breathe. I closed my eyes and tried to remember my breathing techniques. In for 5, hold for 4, out for 7. Or was it 8? Damn it. But my slow, deep breaths came out rattled. Reaching for the chair, I sank into it, resting my elbows on the table and my head in my hands. If I could just get my thoughts together. All at once, visions of an entire lifetime slammed into me. Emotions crashed through me, too many to name. I felt joy, then sadness, heard laughter, then a baby's first cry. My baby's first cry? But everything was coated in darkness. I opened my eyes. The lilac-colored paper lay on the desk in front of me, blank. My hand involuntarily moved, picking up a pen from nowhere. My breath was stuck in my throat, as in horror, I watched myself write. I tried to warn you. I was trapped. I am sorry. Sadie, I work all day to put food on this table. You think it's gonna cook itself? Jeff's voice thundered from the top of the staircase, just beyond the door leading into the house. My stomach dropped as a wave of realization hit me so hard I would have fallen if I weren't already sitting. I turned to face the young girl behind me. I already knew she'd be there. My eyes met hers, and I only knew of one way out. With trembling hands and a heart heavy with guilt, I hurriedly stuffed the letter into the envelope. A single tear slipped down my cheek as I whispered, I never should have opened that letter. Let's continue with the next, no less thrilling stories. The Whisper in the City. The dark skeletons of skyscrapers stretched into the twilight sky. I trudged along an empty street, my feet dragging through the damp sand, leaving deep grooves behind me. How long had I been here? I couldn't tell. The overcast horizon was slowly growing lighter, the mist thinning with each passing moment. The street seemed familiar to me, but any landmarks that might have been here before were completely effaced now. Everything around me was falling apart, disintegrating into sand that covered every inch of the ground. Suddenly, a soft, faint whisper came from somewhere in the distance. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen anyone else in this desolate place, so I shuffled toward the sound. The voice came again, this time a little closer and more insistent, but I still couldn't make out the words or pinpoint where it was coming from. I tried to pick up my pace, but the sand was dense and viscous between my toes. The whisper kept calling, getting clearer, as though someone was tuning a radio. It was soothing, but firm. I sensed it wished me no harm, at least as long as I did what it told me to. Finally, I understood what it was saying. Come on, just a little bit further, the voice urged. It seemed like it was coming from a building to my right. I stared into the shadows in the gaping doorway that led into a dark hall. Nobody was there. I caught a reflection in one of the grimy shards of glass jutting from a window frame. Was it me? It couldn't be. How could I be this old and shriveled? I turned away and wandered toward the low horizon. We need to get ready. Somebody is coming, the voice called from up ahead. A warm rain suddenly began to fall. It frothed in my hair and trickled down my cheeks. The air filled with a strange scent, something fresh and sweet. It didn't seem right. Rain shouldn't smell like that. The voice kept coaxing me forward, and I kept on wading through fragrant sheets of rain, my feet squelching in the soggy sand. After a while, the rain stopped, and the sky cleared a little, though the sun was still hidden behind the thick veil of clouds. The lukewarm mist curled around every turn, filling the streets that branched out from the crossroads I passed. If only it were clear enough to see what lay in the distance. Maybe then I could remember. Just as I reached the next junction, the whisper gave me a new command. All right, let's get something to eat. Come on now. Turn here. I looked from side to side. Across the road to my left stood the remains of a diner. I plodded toward the building through the endless sand. I thought there couldn't possibly be anything to eat here. But as I stumbled over the threshold, I caught a whiff of toast and coffee. The diner was as decayed as everything else in this city. There was less sand inside than on the street, but it still covered the floor with an even layer. The display counter stood empty, the glass shattered. Here and there, overturned furniture lay scattered across the ground. The upholstery on the chairs and benches had rotted away a long time ago. The cup-shaped clock on the wall was missing its hands. Decay, dust, and sand. There was no one inside. Still, I heard muted whispers coming from every corner, buzzing like cicadas on a summer night. I moved through the room, trying to make out what the voices were saying, but there were just too many of them now. I shuffled through the jumbled chairs and tables to the center of the room. Here, on one of the tables, sat a plate of food and a cup of coffee. My stomach rumbled. There were no utensils, so I grabbed the food with my hands, stuffing it into my mouth. The toast was crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. The omelet was fluffy and creamy. The coffee was strong and sweet. How long had it been since I had last eaten anything? I wasn't sure. It felt like ages. Suddenly, the air around me shimmered as though in a heat haze. The dilapidated diner faded away, and I found myself in a warm, sunlit kitchen. Light wood furniture, a crisp tablecloth, plates with delicate flower patterns on the rim. A woman stood in front of the stove. Her hair fell in neat waves, and she wore a light blue fit and flare dress. She turned to me and smiled. "Georgie, would you like another piece of toast?" she asked. Was she talking to me? Was that my name? I wanted to ask her what was going on, but before I could find the words, the mirage disappeared. I was back in the decaying diner, an empty plate before me. "Okay, George, you're done? Let's go now," the whisper cooed. I followed the voice back into the street. It kept urging me forward with its bright, incessant tone. Well, at least now I knew my name. But all the other questions still whirled in my head. What did the voice want from me? Where was I going? How long had I been here? Who was I? Really, it felt like this mess in my head would boil over, washing away all this dirty sand and all the debris of this dead city. I gritted my teeth, clenched my fists, and plowed forward. At last, the road led me to a park. Patches of grass poked through the sand. The trees, covered in yellow and red leaves, peeked through the fog, taunting me. A path lined with benches led into the mist. All right, let's sit down here. I settled onto the nearest bench. Quiet fragments of music fluttered to me from somewhere far away. The sound was comforting, familiar. The voice hummed around me for a moment before fading into the background. The music grew louder and steadier. I thought I recognized the melody, but couldn't quite put my finger on it. It reminded me of someone I used to miss. I sat alone, enveloped by the soothing blanket of music, staring at the colorful trees before me. Bit by bit, my angst and frustration melted away. After a while, I heard the whispers again. The voice that had been guiding me was talking to somebody else now. The new voice seemed familiar, like I'd heard it sometime long ago, in another life. I felt a movement in the air beside me. Someone touched my hand. Dad? Dad, it's me.
Child.
The small room was tidy and clean. As nice as a room in such a facility could be. The curtains were open, and you could see a small park, colored in gold and red by the approaching cold. An old jazz standard was flowing from the player in the corner. A woman sat on a stool beside an armchair, where an old, frail man rested. She held his hand. "I'm sorry, Miss Ross. He's not having a good day today," a nurse said gently from behind the armchair. To be honest, they're few and far between now, and it's hard to say how many more he'll have. I know, but it's still so hard. It's like he's wandering further and further away, the woman said, wiping the corner of her eye. Dad, it's Katie. I'm here." His dry, thin fingers tightened around hers. "And the next story will be told right away. Please listen carefully." Haunting. Jack couldn't speak. He could only scream as he woke up to the sound of his mother's voice, whispering to him from the corner of his dark bedroom. Of course, it wasn't actually his mother. He knew that. How could it be, when she had died in a car accident just a little over a week earlier? "Jack, come over here, Jack. You can see me, can't you? Come over here, child." His chest was heavy, his bladder loose with fear. Looking over into the corner, as he flailed amidst his perspiration-damp sheets, he realized that he could indeed see something. The same something, in fact, that he had seen on that terrible night of his mum's demise, just minutes after his aunt, who had been babysitting him at the time, had received the phone call that would cause both of their worlds to come crashing down. She had broken the news to him, and he had seen it standing over by the window of his aunt's tiny living room. It had been at the funeral too, and now here it was again, invading the privacy of his bedroom this time, lurking in the corner, watching him, taunting him, by speaking with his dead mother's voice. "Jack! Come here, Jack! Now!" Tears of terror spilled down his cheeks as he scrambled to sit up. His gaze was fixed upon the corner, on the hulking, dark outline of a man who stood there, wide and tall, so tall that its head almost brushed the ceiling. It had no face, no features. It was only visible because, somehow, it was even blacker than the darkness itself which suffused the room. Blacker than the very night. How could that be? His screams tapered off as his throat constricted. From elsewhere in the house, he could hear the sound of frantic movements. His aunt had clearly been roused by his yells. Her footsteps raced across the landing, old floorboards groaning loudly. "I'll return, Jack. You can't avoid me forever." His mother's voice hissed quietly. The thing then scuttled, spider-like, across to the wall, and then through it, as though no barrier existed at all, as though the laws of physical matter simply did not matter to it one bit. The thing disappeared from his sight just as the bedroom door was flung open and the light snapped on to dazzle him with its bright glare. "Jack, Jack, are you all right?" His Aunt Alice stood there, looking pale and startled. Her resemblance to his mum, as always these days, struck him like a dagger through the heart. They had the same raven hair, just as he did himself, the same ice blue eyes, same sharp cheekbones, same thin lips. His mother's, now stilled forever, whilst his aunt's were pinched in a worried frown as she approached the bed where he lay. "Sweetheart, what is it? Did you have a bad dream?" He shook his head. It was bad, all right, but it was no dream. He raised a trembling hand to point over at the corner where the thing had been standing, mocking him by its mimicking of his dead mother's voice as it tried to lure him in. Alice turned to look, but quickly brought her attention back to him. "There's nothing there, Jack. You just had a nightmare, that's all." Her gaze shifted, moving down over his sheets, where a damp stain alerted him also to the fact that he must have wet himself. He cringed, the tears coursing faster down his cold cheeks. What kind of a 12-year-old wet the bed? "It's all right," his aunt soothed. "I'll get those in the wash, and you can come and sleep with me in my bed for the rest of the night. It'll be dawn in a couple of hours anyway." And so saying, she ushered him out of his bed and took his hand to lead him over to her room. As always, it smelled strongly of lavender. After tucking him in, she retreated back to strip the damp sheets from his bed. Meanwhile, he lay there, alone once more in the darkness, eyes wide open and frantically scanning the dark shapes all around him, lest the shadow should return again that night to torment him. All the while, the sound of his aunt's stifled sobs haunted his ears.
Chanta,
Abi, if you can hear me, please respond. I don't know what to do. He hasn't spoken a word since you died, and he seems so disturbed. He's been having night terrors, and Jack crept down the stairs, being careful to avoid the creaking steps. His skin was crawling, body covered in goosebumps, not from the cold, but from a renewed sense of fear. Peering over the banister, he saw his aunt in the living room. She was sitting with her back to him, cross-legged on the floor beside the coffee table. On the table itself, right in front of her, was a board. A wooden board with letters and numbers on its surface. The exact same kind of board as he remembered seeing his mother messing around with so many times before. Late in the evenings, after she'd had a bottle of wine. Abi, are you here with us? Please, Gyan. He wanted to run down the remainder of the steps, grab that board, and smash it to pieces, or burn it to ashes. For there was something about it that just seemed so very, very wrong. He was stopped in his tracks, however, by a sudden, sharp gasp from his aunt. She had her fingers resting on top of a small, circular piece of glass, which rested atop the board. And as he watched, the piece of glass slid free of Alice's grip and went spinning away, clearly moving of its own volition. It raced in jagged lines all across the board. Jack felt dizzy at what he was seeing. His legs gave way beneath him as he sank down onto one of the steps, his buttocks slamming painfully hard against the bare wood. Candlelight leapt in the room before him, the multiple flames flickering wildly. A muffled groan rumbled deep in his chest. Alice did not turn around. She was far too intent upon whatever message was being spelled out to hear him. He watched as she snatched up a nearby notebook and pen, scribbling frantically as she noted down what she was seeing reveal itself before her, never taking her eyes off the board. Eventually, the glass fell still. Something stirred in the air. The candle stuttered. His aunt gave a shiver, and Jack watched as the shadow man emerged through the closed door into the kitchen, moving to stand right beside Alice, reaching out with one of its thick arms as though to touch her. Another gust of wind blew through the room, carrying on it the stench of something rotting. Unable to take it anymore, Jack scrambled to his feet and ran back up the stairs. He cowered in his aunt's bed, covers pulled up over his head. The hunt never ends. You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you? The note read. The man had shivered when he had read those ominous words, as perspiration began to drip down from his temple, the salty liquid seeping into his eyes and temporarily blinding him. This is the end, the man had said to himself in an agitated, trembling whisper. as he looked down at the sheet of notepaper which had been left on his office desk. He glanced around at the other employees to see if anyone was looking his way, giving him some indication on who had left the message. But all of them were engaged in their own little world of toting up the facts and figures which were constantly coming through on their computer terminals. What had caused this man to turn deathly white and feel so nauseous? How had those 9 little words on the page that had now turned his world completely upside down come to cause him so much anguish and despair? That unhappy event had happened a week before. So let us now find out what had caused this man, Henry Miller, to end up in this now distressing location where he now found himself. At this moment, he was looking between the slats of a Venetian blind, observing the street outside, and trying as best as he could to remain unseen from the road in front of the building, where he now cringed, frightened out of his wits. How had it come to this? He thought. Last week, he didn't have a care in the world. All was going well at work. And then came that note, and he found himself involved in something that had instantly changed his life. And now he was on the run, constantly looking over his shoulder. And at this moment, hiding in this abandoned building, a structure that had a large sign outside stating that it was condemned and would shortly be torn down. So, how long could he remain here before he had to find another place of sanctuary? The year is 1948. The war is over. After 6 years of bloodshed and butchery by a psychopath and his evil, willing collaborators, during which an estimated 80 to 100 million people had died or been murdered. The Nuremberg trials had finished, and many, many hundreds of German Nazi war criminals had found justice on the end of a rope for crimes against humanity. Then, there were some who had decided that a cyanide pill was a much quicker way to escape the noose of retribution. Others, seeing that the end was near, had made their getaway before the Russians entered Berlin and tortured them, finding their way to South America, where many of them lived for a while, trying to evade the men from the Simon Wiesenthal organization, people dedicated to finding every last Nazi and bringing them to justice, headed by their leader, a man known as the Nazi Hunter, who was a Holocaust survivor. Even though many years have passed, the hunt still goes on, still finding those vile and depraved monsters, a subspecies of the human race. Although some are well into their dotage, justice is still being served. A particular case in point is the case of Adolf Eichmann, who, along with Heinrich Himmler, was the architect of the final solution, where 6 million Jews were sent to the death camps, only to be gassed, their bodies cremated, and the remains crushed. Eichmann was finally located in Argentina in 1961, thinking that after 16 years he was safe. But justice caught up with him, and he met the Grim Reaper on the end of a rope a year later. But returning to Henry Miller, a man who had changed his name from Henrik Mengele and who had managed to escape from his home in Germany to live in Spain, a neutral country, during the war, just after the conflict had begun. The surname he was born with, Mengele, was the same name as the man who was once revered by the Nazi Party for his inhumane and horrific experiments on unwilling participants. The infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele, a man given the name of the Angel of Death, a man, if indeed he could even be called that, who performed appalling and unspeakable experimentation on live inmates of the concentration camp at Auschwitz. Most of those subjects dying a lingering, painful, and agonizing death, all in the cause of making the so-called German master race into a nation of blue-eyed, blonde, Aryan supermen. But what had caused Henry to be reduced to his present situation? It was all due to that one badge letter that he had found on his desk just over a week before, which caused him a great deal of torment. He had read the words, his trembling hands trying to stop the shaking that was coursing through his body. The words that read, "You thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you?" For many years, he had feared that maybe someone, somewhere, at some time, might find out about his namesake and make his life a living hell, maybe even murder him, with the idea that he was in some way engaged in the work carried out by that misguided and psychotic mass murderer, and had, somehow, missed out on receiving the same fate that had befallen the other members of the Nazi death squads. But he had been so careful, and had never told anyone of his former name, or his possible relationship to the Angel of Death at Auschwitz. So, how could someone have found out where he lived or worked? The only way out that he could think of was to go on the run, getting well away from anyone he had worked with and from where he had lived. He had no plan, just a crazed idea that he must stay out of sight in this empty building before he made his next move. All sorts of wild ideas coursing through his brain. Thoughts that he had never even dreamt about, up until now, came into his mind. It was a few weeks later in the office where Henry had formerly been employed, a place from which he had mysteriously disappeared some time previously, without explanation. One of the other employees who had worked with him had just read an article in the newspaper that had shocked him. It mentioned that his former workmate had been found dead in an abandoned building, having seemingly committed suicide by ingesting a cyanide pill. As tears welled up in his eyes, he murmured words that he found extremely difficult to say. "Henry, what happened? Why did you do it? Just as your friends here were organizing a surprise party for your birthday. You tried so hard to keep it a secret, and you thought that we wouldn't find out, didn't you? The above story has ended. Let's listen to the next story. January 21st. It was another one of those days. The rain was pouring down like iron sheets. The train had come half an hour late, and I had lost my wallet in the station bathroom. In moments like these, you truly wonder whether a higher power was out to get you. When the train finally pulled up at 1:30, I glared it down. Most people would have been blown away by the pristine white sheen, the unnatural silence of the engine, or the blast of sub-zero aircon that streamed out of the open doors. But not me. 21 years of life had taught me enough about the world. I trudged onto the carriage at the end and plopped myself down on the backmost seat. If I had been just 10 years younger, no, even 2 months younger, I might have enjoyed the richness of the leather or the antique smell of the wooden armrests. But I wasn't the young fool that I once was. As we slowly pulled out of the gloomy building, I finally let out the breath I had been holding in all day. I knew where I was going, of course. I knew what I was going to do. Even without the map pasted on the chair in front of me, I knew the name of my destination in my bones. Sunset Station, where my path ended. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain platter against the window, like bullets. The last lullaby I'd ever enjoy, I supposed. I fiddled with a golden chain strung around my neck. Not even a minute passed by when someone tapped my shoulder. "Is this seat taken?" I prized my eyes open and felt my heart skip a beat. She had flawless skin, about a shade darker than sandstone. Her jet black hair cascaded down in smooth waterfalls, gently brushing against her lower back. They formed a loose curtain over her chocolate eyes, which glittered like galaxies. A burgundy jacket was draped over her shoulders, the velvet seeming softer than cat fur. Her nails were dabbed with a light layer of wine nail polish, complementing her lips. Something about her seemed oddly familiar to me, even though I'd never met her before. "Is it taken?" she repeated. Her voice was a soft jingle, a quiet chortle. I blinked. No, I let out a tiny groan when she plopped herself down, the smell of vanilla following her. The one thing I didn't want to do was engage in conversation on the tail end of my journey. So, of course, it was the first thing that happened. We sat in silence for a while, the pinging of the bullets of rain making the only sound in the carriage. I glanced out the window and heaved a sigh. The same flooded fields, dreary hills, the same ashen sky. I guess it wasn't much to miss. The speakers crackled to life, interrupting my train of thought. "Welcome on board the Destiny Line. The next stop is Sunset Station, where this service ends." "Sunset, sunset, sunset. Are you going to Sunset Station?" the woman asked. I started and silently cursed myself. "Oh, yes, I am." Didn't mean to disturb you. I chanced to glance at her face again. Where had I seen her before? A wide grin spread, flashed across her rose lips. "That's splendid," she purred, blatantly ignoring all of the subtle hints I was dropping. As if on cue, she swiveled towards me. "I heard there's a beautiful, ethereal wooden bridge there that overlooks a waterfall. You planning on going? My journey ends there." I didn't bother elaborating. She tilted her head, studying me as if I were a helpless guinea pig. I hated that, the way her brown eyes drilled right through me and came out the other side. There was something off about her. I just couldn't place my finger on what it was. Why did it all seem so eerily familiar? "So you have gone there before," she pressed, her breath the sickening smell of peppermint. "Surely you must have gone there with someone else." "Yes." The word slipped out of my mouth like an eel slipping out of wet hands. "How delightful!" she exclaimed with a sharp giggle. "I did too." "Who did you go with?" The question was a wrecking ball. Who? Her voice was a gong, the words, the beats ringing in my mind. "My fiancé." Her stare was like a magnet, drawing out the words from my lips. Or, at least, she was. My voice was dark and bitter. "What business do you have with my life? I'm only interested in my own life." She stared at her palms. "At least, I hope I am. Something happened to me, and I need your help in making sense of it." That struck a chord with me. "I'm sure you loved her, as I once did to my boyfriend." She was the fire to my ice, the black to my white, the day to my night, the sun to my moon, the joy to my grief, the good to my evil, the hope to my grief, the solace to my rage, the life to my death. We were worlds and eons apart, but we were perfect together. Every second I spent with her was an hour of paradise. The ground she stepped on was kissed by God. She was my Polaris when I was sailing across the ocean of my life. A single teardrop crept down my cheek, the hot scar of the past. She's dead now. Since when? Since 2 months ago. Died in a tragic accident. I coughed and started fiddling with the chain again. Something flashed in the woman's eyes. Car crash, shattered spine. Her voice sounded like an autumn breeze, hiding the cold of winter in the warmth of summer. Dead in the night of the 21st of January. Each word she spoke sent flashes of red across my vision. Gray Malibu came out of nowhere. "Yeah?" I narrowed my eyes at the woman. "How did you know?" "My boyfriend knew someone who died on the 21st in a car crash as well." She cleared her throat. "How did you meet her?" "At a university. We both majored in criminology. We matched each other's cautiousness and prudence." "And you studied in criminology as well?" Met him when I was an undergraduate. It's funny, really, how similar our two stories are. It truly was. She turned to me again, scanning me up and down. What aren't you telling me? What do I have to tell you? The real question is, what aren't you telling me? Sighing, she murmured, I'm trying to find out why my life took a turn for the worse 2 months ago. And now, suddenly, this morning, I woke up to find that no one knew me, and the world's colors were bleached. So please, I need your help. Her lips were truly interesting. The way they pursed. They were perfectly arched, like Cupid's bow. Where had I seen them before? What do you need my help with? On the day of the accident? What were you feeling? Grief. Are you sure? What kind of question is that? Of course I was. Again. Are you sure? What are you implying here? I spat, clenching my fists. I hated her so much then, the way she never flicked her eyes off of me for 1 second. What I'm saying, she continued, is that you and I both know that you felt something else that night. Guilt. Her voice was the buzz of a beehive. I doubt most people would have liked it. I swear, though, I heard it somewhere before. In the distance, the train began to whistle. I chanced a glance out the window. The rainy plains had been blotted out by a black tunnel. The Stygian wall was a nice reflection of my mind, I suppose. All aboard the Destiny Express. Yes, I snarled. I felt guilty. I felt guilty because we'd been arguing right before she ran out of the house. I tried to call her back. She didn't even look. Before she dashed across the road, something clicked inside my head. But you knew that already, didn't you? Goosebumps spread across my arm when she nodded. The hazy puzzle was slowly getting clearer. What were you arguing about? Why would I think it would be better for both of us if you stop hiding the truth, she interrupted. So, I'm going to ask again. What were you quarreling about? I'm sorry. Those deep, brown eyes weren't galaxies. That was my mistake. They were black holes, sucking in everything. I was confronting her about what I saw that afternoon. My voice was black ice. I came home early, and I discovered that there were 2 other people in the house, being intimate with each other. The man, I still don't know who. The woman? Well, needless to say, I did know who it was. I shuddered. She nodded again, slower this time. What did she say to you when you confronted her? That I didn't really love her? That I never really did? That I was exploiting her for money? Were you? Well, I filched the occasional penny or 2. I winced under her glare. Fine. I forced her to pay for my tuition fees. She has so much money that she doesn't know what to do with it anyhow. Might as well put it to good use. I toyed with my golden chain again. The woman didn't seem to agree with me, but she moved on. All right. I think you've helped me clear up a lot of problems now. Before I could heave a sigh of relief, she continued. But there's still one last question. I want to ask you, what could that be? I started rubbing my fingers against the golden chain. The chain had the dull, tingling smell of iron. Just like something else. Something darkwa. Where were you at the moment of the accident? Shadows gathered around her eyes. I told you already. Which is where, again? Steel hands gripped my lungs. I was calling out to her, trying to stop her from recklessly dashing. She didn't listen to me. Was I imagining things? Or was there a flicker somewhere on her face? No, her neck was flickering. It was slowly bending, slowly becoming deformed. Or was I imagining things? She spoke 2 words. You're lying. The temperature seemed to plummet. What? You're lying. You know it in your heart. You've known for 2 months. Oh my. Death is a lie. No, no, no. It couldn't be happening. But it was staring right back at me. The truth clicked, like the final piece of the jigsaw puzzle fitting in. I knew now. I knew everything. Fine. 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 I admit it. I wasn't running after her. I wasn't calling out to her. I wasn't trying to stop her. No. I'm a double-faced liar. Yes, that's what I am. A psychopath. My fiancée did not die in an accident. I killed her. I killed her. I killed her. I killed her. I dragged her out of the house. I threw her in front of a speeding gray Malibu. Oh, I watched her die. I knew it in my bones. Oh, then what are you? How are you here? Haunting me to my very last day. Why have you come back? Why? Are you even real? That, she whispered. You will never know. You have lived 2 months in anguish because I never truly left you. Every hour of your life has felt like a tortured second crawling by. Just look at what's hanging from your neck, the golden mark of Cain. I tore it off the chain and pressed it against my face. No, forgive me, please. Tears streamed down my face, a waterfall of guilt. I'll do anything. The train came to a stop at the station. Sunset. The end of the line. Oh, her smile. I hated her smile. The way they were draped over the fury within her. She glanced out the window, out of the station, out of the world. I followed her gaze at the bridge overlooking the waterfall, where it all began. There's always a way out. She stood up. How horrible she looked. The way her head was tilted to the side, almost as if her spine was broken. I trust you'll know what to do. Goodbye, Daigle. There's a grizzly on the plane. People are shuffling down the aisle of the plane, scooting 1 step at a time, shoving things in the overhead compartment, elbowing and kneeing each other, as they throw themselves down into their seats. The flight attendants are smiling brightly and saying, "Good morning, good morning, good morning," to each passenger in turn as they enter the plane. The captain is there with them. I take a good look at him. I know this guy. Kind of a wimp. That's why I knew this was the right flight. I think his name is Cameron. When I press the barrel of this gun against his head, he'll do anything I say. One man with a gun can do anything. I give him a little wink. I'll see you soon. It's easy to get around airport security when you work at an airport. This is gonna be my final flight. And the final flight for all these people too. I'm not gonna shoot them all. Maybe just a few. Might as well. But most of them are going out with a real bang. Not me though. Gonna shoot myself right before we crash. My seat is 32F. So here we go. Almost there. And I stop. I see it. But I can't. There. There's... What? No. Yes. There's a goddamn grizzly bear sitting in a seat. Buckled in. A woman sitting next to him is feeding him pink bits of something from a bowl. The bear is huge, but somehow fits in the seat like it was custom made. It's sitting straight up in the seat, buckled in. How? What? The woman caught me staring. Ooh, sorry. He doesn't like to be stared at. The bear is staring at me with deep brown eyes, dark brown fur, huge paws, long claws. It starts snorting and moaning, and I shake my head and keep walking to my seat. I look around, and everyone else seems to be fine with this. How did I not see the bear walk onto the plane? Why is no one else freaking out about this? I find 32F, and I look back to the bear, who's a few rows ahead. The bear turns its head and looks back at me. I turn my head away and drop down into my seat. The bear turned around, and the woman next to it gave it another morsel. A man sits down next to me and says, "Hello there. Do you see that?" I said. "Oh yeah, we've got a full plane today. That's good luck, you know." "No, not that. I point. "What?" "The bear," I said, so loud that a few people turned around and looked at me. "Oh yeah, he's a cute guy, isn't he?" "That's insane," I tried whispering, but I know everyone heard me. Shouldn't be a problem. The guy sits down and starts looking at his phone. Just like that. I look around and see others doing the same. I see people reading books, eating snacks, whatever. Nobody is freaking out over the goddamn grizzly bear sitting in 25B. "Sir, I'll need to place your bag in the overhead compartment," says a flight attendant. "No, this is my carry-on. My gun is in here. Sorry, sir, but new safety procedures say we need all bags placed in the overhead bin for takeoff. Once we reach cruising altitude, You can get your bag. She reaches over to take my bag from my lap, but I hold on to it. Sir, please, she says with a firm pull. I pull back. She's not letting go. We're having a small tug of war over my neighbor's lap. Let her have the bag, just doing her job, says my nonchalant neighbor. I let go, and she opened the compartment over my seat. Oh, we're all full here. Let's see. She's opening compartments down the line, away from me. Here we are. Sir, I'm placing your bag right here, right above the bear. How did the bear get on here? How did it fit on the plane? Why does the bear have an aisle seat? Why is there a bear on the plane? Why is no one freaking out? She shuts the compartment and walks towards the front of the plane. We'll be taking off soon. You look nervous, son. Is this your first flight? Asks the man next to me. No, I've flown lots of times. This was supposed to be the last time. The attendants are doing their usual pre-flight routine of instructing people how to put their seatbelts together and how to put on the emergency oxygen masks. I guess the bear doesn't need any help. Its caretaker is sitting right next to it. The seatbelt fits, so I guess they have a special bear mask too. Wouldn't want the wild animal to get hurt, now would we? Focus. It's just an animal, after all. It'll be the first thing I shoot. I've got a machine gun, so I'll just spray it with a dozen bullets or so. That should keep the rest of the idiots in their seats. Then I'm back in charge. Bear looks calm anyway. Shouldn't be hard. Today is my day. Nothing is going to change this. The pilot tells us on the overhead that we're ready for takeoff. The bear made a low growl, and the woman next to it scratched behind his ears, soothing it. The plane starts moving down the runway. Normally, this part of flying doesn't bother me, but today, I'm gripping my armrests. The acceleration picks up, and the plane's engines get louder. I'm staring at the back of the bear's head, which is completely still, like some damn taxidermy project that had its own ticket. The wheels of the plane leave the ground, and we are in the air. I'm in a window seat, so I turn my head to look out, hoping it will calm me down, knowing that all is going according to plan, except for the bear. All I have to do is get the bag, kill the bear, shoot that bitch that brought him on here too, maybe a few more people, just for fun. Then up to the cockpit with a hostage on the bad end of the barrel to make my way in. I'll tell the captain that we're making an unexpected detour right into the middle of the nearest city. Right before we crash, I'll shoot myself. We have to wait before we reach cruising altitude. Then I can move about freely. Then we'll have about 30 to 40 minutes before we get close to the nearest big city. Enough time to feel like God before dying. I'm watching through the window, still gripping the armrests. Looks like you need a drink of water, says the man next to me. I realize my forehead is covered with sweat. Yeah, I guess I could, I say, wiping my forehead. I look back and see that the goddamn bear is reclining in its seat. Person behind it doesn't seem to mind. Just then, the bear turned around and looked at me. I turned back to the window. Even over the sound of the plane's engines, I can hear the bear smacking its lips, followed by another low rumbling growl, almost like it's annoyed by me. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to fuck up your day. I must have gotten lost in the window, as the next time I looked up, the snack cart was being pushed down the aisle by an attendant. What's the bear gonna have? A cookie? Water? Or Coke? When that cart gets behind me, I'm gonna get up and get over there and grab my bag. I'll take a can of Coke when she gets here. Now she's asking the woman next to the bear if she'll have anything. The woman takes a cookie and a cup of water. The bear got nothing. I guess it's full. Come on, come on. Hurry up. She's taking her sweet time, pushing that cart down the aisle. My jaw is clenched tight, like a bear trap. All right, here she is. Finally. Would you like anything, sir? She asks the man next to me. Yes, a water for myself and for my friend here. No, thank you. I'll have a Coke. Oh, nonsense. You sweating like that? You need a water. 2 waters, please. The woman poured 2 waters, and I gulped mine down in 1 drink before she even left. Would you like another? She asks. No, I want a Coke. She hands me the red can, and I chug half of it. The sugar and caffeine hit my brain like ice water. I put the can down, and the bear is staring at me again. The attendant pushes the cart down to the row behind us. It's time now. The bear is still looking back at me. I'll give it a minute. Finish my drink. You know, I had a bear like that when I was younger, said the man next to me. What? Oh yeah. His name was Popper. Great bear. You ever had a bear? No, I fucking haven't. I'm gonna kill this son of a bitch too. Right after the bear. The bear is still staring at me. And now I'm staring back. I finish my can of Coke and crunch it in my hand. I'm in control here. It's time. Now. Right now. Let's go. I unbuckle my seatbelt and stumble across my neighbor's knees, almost falling into the opposite row. A lot of people notice and are now watching me, but the bear is now looking straight ahead, unaware of me. I think it's cool. Just a few steps, open the compartment, and start blasting. This is my day, and nothing is going to screw it up. The aisle seems a mile long, and it's taking all my willpower to pick up my feet for every step. I make it to the compartment, the bear sitting right next to me. I reach up to open the hatch, and, "Excuse me," says the woman with the bear. "Could you hand me my bag? It's in there. I need something from it." "Is it for the bear?" I ask. I didn't mean to, but it slipped. "No, It's just a book for me to read. I can smell the bear. Deep pine woods. Its huge paw is brushing against my leg. It's just the fur touching me, but I see the long claws. I open the compartment, and there's my bag, right in front of hers. One quick draw, and I could shoot the bear. Just unload the whole fucking clip into him and forget the rest. Make my way to the cockpit, and the bear's huge paw falls from the armrest, and the claws scrape my leg. I fall back into someone's lap, with my heart in my throat. I look at the bear, and it's still in its seat, eyes closed, breathing deep. That low rumble, which is louder than the engines. Oh, sorry about that. He's just sleeping. Sir, excuse me, says the flight attendant with the cart. She's finished handing out cookies and Cokes, and now wants to go back to the front. With the look on her face, I believe she would run me over if she could. She grabbed the lady's bag and handed it to her and closed the compartment. I need something out of there, I say. Yes, sir. She stops and nearly falls over her cart as the plane has hit sudden turbulence. I bump into the person sitting behind me, opposite the compartment. Sir, get back to your seat. I just need... Sir, you need to get back to your seat. The plane bumps and shakes, and now the bear is awake and growling. The woman hands him some pink bit out of a container, which I can now see is fish. Salmon. The bear snacks and smacks, but still makes that growling sound, making an awful mixture of sounds. The attendant has pulled the cart backwards down the aisle, leaving me an open path to my seat. The bear looks at me with salmon hanging from its jaws, so I crawl and stumble back to my seat. Buckle up. It's a bumpy ride, says the idiot sitting next to me. I'm going to kill the bear, then him, then the attendant, then the woman. I buckle my belt, and still my head slams into the window. People are screaming, kids are crying, the plane is bumping and rattling. The captain's voice comes over the speaker, saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats. We are experiencing extreme turbulence." The bear is growling and tossing in its seat. The woman tries to feed it more salmon, but the bear isn't having it. He swats away her hand with a huge paw, and the pink salmon goes flying across the plane. The bear tosses and turns and rumbles harder than the plane and breaks free. The goddamn thing has gotten out of its chair. I have to go now. I unbuckle my seatbelt, and the moron next to me says, "You don't want to do that, son." I punch him in the mouth, just so I know I got him one good time before this is over. I'll take this bear down with the rest of them. I brace myself against the seats, and I take small steps with firm feet. and make my way to the compartment. The bear is squeezed in the aisle on all fours, bouncing off the seats, but mostly steady. Facing away from me. Good. Almost there. I grab the seat it used to sit in, and I open the compartment. I unzip my bag, and I see the machine gun. It's already loaded. All I have to do is grab it and open fire. Never killed an animal before. It's kinda like a bonus. The plane has settled. No more turbulence. Everything is still and smooth, and I hear the bear make a noise. I turn to see it facing me. On all fours, it's half as tall as me. Oh my. Thank you, thank you. Please, help him to his seat, says the woman. He just loses his temper when there's turbulence. I look back to the bear, who's looking at me with deep brown eyes. Just take his paw and help him to his seat. I'd help you, but I hurt my ankle in all the trouble. Just take his paw. I don't know why, but I stick out my hand. The bear puts its paw out and softly lights on my palm. It makes some kind of noise that I can't figure out if it's aggressive or friendly. I slowly back up, keeping my eyes on the bear as it walks towards its seat. The bear sits down, and she buckles him in, and the whole plane starts clapping. They're saying, "Aw," and "how sweet," and whatever else. Are you fucking kidding me? The captain's voice over the speaker says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be in the clear now, but I am asking that you remain in your seats for the remainder of the flight. Thank you." Sir, that goddamn attendant again. She appeared like a fucking ghost. Please return to your seat. I'm so goddamn flabbergasted. I don't know what to do. Just whatever. I shut the compartment. I take my seat. The guy sitting next to me is holding his mouth, but pulls his hand down to say, "Good job back there. I forgive you for socking me. We all get a little emotional sometimes under pressure. It takes a brave man to do what you did, risking yourself for that poor animal. I'm sure he appreciates you." I don't know what to say to that. I look out the window and see the big city, so small way down below us. I watch as clouds fill the window and blot out the city with pure white. I look back at the bear, who's looking back at me. I stayed in my seat for the rest of the flight, grabbed my bag, and deboarded the plane. Not one bullet fired. High-speed train. Congressman David Chen found himself where he never guessed he'd be. The dining car on the express. A high-speed train humming through the Hungarian countryside. A patchwork of browns and gray dirty snow flashed by. Abandoned Soviet-era factories passed surreal in skeletal frames, riddled with broken windows and crumbling walls. David's head pounded. Nausea caused him to sweat. He hated trains, but loved his wife, and the Prague conference was over. Just one more meeting, And then he and his wife could take a river cruise out of Budapest. Studying the wine list across from David sat Marcus Blackwood. When the waiter came, he ordered a 2016 Tokaji. The waiter paused and bit his lower lip, avoiding Blackwood's eyes. "We only have a 2018. Your boss promised the 2016, Blackwood said, stroking his precisely trimmed stubble. "I suggest you find it, or else." David noted his old friend, the Blackwood he'd grown up with, the new director of Aid Alliance, had mastered making threats. "Trains have a finite quality," Blackwood mused as they waited for the wine. "Once you're on them, you can't get off." David sipped water from a crystal glass. "But you can change the destination. That depends on who's controlling the switches," Blackwood said. "By the way, how's your Sarah? She starts Columbia in the fall. Is that right? The tuition must be a killer." His stomach rolled over. How did Blackwood know about the Columbia acceptance letter? "She's fine. Elizabeth and I are quite proud of her. I saw you with Elizabeth at the Prague conference." "Vacation?" "Yes. Doubling up the conference with time in Budapest." Blackwood winked. "And a write-off for the entire trip?" Blackwood tossed his right hand. "I was thinking about how we've known each other since the early days. Hell, I was at your wedding. We're warriors, you and I. Into the breach and all that. Well, this warrior is getting tired of the congressional grind. I'm thinking of not running next term. Call it quits." Blackwood laughed, his thick frame tight against his dress shirt. "Say it ain't so." "No, I would quit. But there's more I want to do. A few years, maybe. Then on to the speaker circuit. Or maybe a pack." The waiter returned with a 2016. "We're in luck, Mr. Blackwood." He opened the wine, offered a taste, then served them both. He carefully placed the bottle on the immaculate white tablecloth. "About your upcoming committee vote," Blackwood said. "Aid distribution, of course, is of paramount importance. But with our audit showing only 30 cents on the dollar reaching recipients, there's some pushback we're fighting against." "I've reviewed the proposal," David said. $8 billion might take some time to get through committee." Blackwood adjusted his broad shoulders and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We need to think about this from the 30,000-foot view," he said. "After all, think of the optics. We're supporting democracy, fighting corruption, and aiding fledgling governments who need the world's help." The waiter refilled their wine glasses while the two men looked on. When he left, Blackwood gulped his wine, leaned into the table, and reached out to adjust David's tie. "Our organization believes there's a benefit to a network of partners. We need expertise to walk us through a complex banking system, the regulatory environment. Would you consider getting involved?" A non-profit, hip deep in money laundering, David thought. Excessive compensation, shell companies. A big plunge for a guy who doesn't fudge on taxes. Never has. Never will. "I'm a congressman. I can't touch this, you know that." David said. No, no, no. Your role would be legitimate, I assure you, Blackwood said. That's what the advisory board is all about. Insurance for, he chuckled, derailments. We want you as a board member after your term ends. It's just, well, in the meantime, we'd like your advice. As a friend. The dulled rush of an opposing train sped by their window. Blackwood steepled his hands in front of him. How's Elizabeth's gallery, by the way? Her art might be worth more once she's passed. Of course, that could be decades away. We certainly don't want any harm to come to her, do we? Blackwood looked down and cut another piece of his steak. David's fork froze on the way to his mouth. He felt anger ripping his insides at the veiled threat against his wife. After slowly setting his fork down, he picked up his wine glass. His hand shook as he gripped the glass, but he gripped harder, and then harder still. The train entered a tunnel. David lost his concentration, diverted by the sudden brightness of the two men's reflection in the window. He stared at the image, but the man in the reflection who looked like him didn't stare back, but shattered the glass with his hand. David stared, transfixed. His reflection picked up a shard with his bleeding hand and wrapped the pointed glass with his cloth napkin. He then reached across the table and slashed Blackwood's throat. Blood splattered on the table as the reflection of Blackwood collapsed. The reflection blanked out as the train shot from the tunnel exit, the horn howling into the twilight. David stared at the wine glass in his hand. Blackwood was no longer across from him. David stumbled from the dining car. He lurched down the corridor to his sleeper cabin, fell into Elizabeth as she opened the door, reeled to the water closet, and retched in the toilet. David, what happened? Elizabeth called through the door. My God! The train approached the outskirts of the city. High rises ahead, pinned to the night sky. The lights in the windows staring down. Soon the train squealed into the station. Elizabeth gripped her husband's arm as they walked to the taxi stand, her eyes riveted on his face. David? Darling? Are you okay? What happened? It's nothing, he said. She held him closer. Are you feeling better? Talk to me. Did you forget anything? David steadied himself against his wife. No, I haven't left anything. As they walked to the taxi stand, he felt in his gut that Blackwood was gone. He realized he'd left him on the train. Some things you can never explain, he thought. But then he felt oddly privileged. He smiled, and even the grime of Budapest tasted a little cleaner. Fate, or science, or the devil himself had stepped in. But not God, he thought. No, this wasn't God. It was another presence who didn't like the alliance, weighing the direction of his daughter's future, his wife's safety, or the price for his looking the other way. Your hand's bleeding, Elizabeth said. It looks like a piece of glass, the demon in the portrait. Denise Gray looked away from her reflection in the store window. The sight of that perfectly proportioned young body only served to remind her of the curse. As a young woman, she'd posed for an enigmatic artist who had painted her picture while spinning words that were at once wonderful and frightening. It hadn't been long after that she learned the reality of the painting and its associated curse. One day, she was accosted by a thief. And before she realized what was happening, he had run a dagger through her heart. She cringed, but when the thief pulled the knife out, there was no blood where she had been stabbed. A swift kick to the groin sent him running, but when she opened her now ruined blouse, she realized that she was unharmed, not even a scratch. Denise thought about it and realized that her situation was like a story her mother had told her, called The Painting of Dorian Gray. "Damn," she whispered as she scraped her knee on a large rock that she'd brushed against, only to look down and realize that her forever young body was still unharmed. She realized that she would have to return to the artist's studio. And if that painting was damaged, she would have to force the artist to find a way to lift the curse without killing her before her time. When she returned to confront the artist, she found him hanging in his studio, dead. Her search for the painting in his studio was in vain, and it was only after another attack that she realized the truth of the curse. The knife had pierced her heart. But again, she felt no pain after the knife had been pulled from her chest. She tracked the painting down to a gallery in a distant town, only to watch the painting destroyed by fire as the gallery burned to the ground, killing the hundreds of people inside. She'd spent many hours waiting for the death that never came. After that, she tried every means of killing herself, but to no avail. Finally, she felt a glimmer of hope as she learned of a book of paintings that had a copy of her painting in it. That book was rumored to be in this tiny library. She took a deep breath as she approached the tiny library. She knew she had to do something, or she would go insane from not being able to die. Denise had arrived just as Jessie had left the library and moved toward the tavern. An hour while the poor, pregnant librarian took lunch wouldn't make a lot of difference, she thought, as she sat down on a nearby bench. She smiled as a group of children ran by. One little brown-eyed girl stopped and smiled back, then ran to join her friends. "The book you want is here," Jessie said, "but you may be disappointed. The book is a manual for destroying demons." "I don't feel like a demon," Denise said. Jessie slid the leather hand-bound book toward Denise. "What happens if I open it?" Jessie shrugged. "I haven't read that far." Denise felt a tingling race up her arm as she pulled the book toward herself. What if she got sucked into the book when she opened it? She looked down at her ruined blouse. She'd neglected to change the blouse, even though she had another in her small travel bag. Throwing caution to the wind, she opened the book. Being stuck in the book would be no worse than not being able to kill herself. The first thing she saw was a horrible version of herself. Her hair was singed, and every injury she'd sustained in getting there had scarred over. When she could finally pull her eyes away from the picture, she began to read. The demon her painting had become had spoken from the painting and convinced the artist to hang himself. Then she had started the fire that destroyed the original painting, killing all the people there for the unveiling. Denise slammed the book closed. The pull of the woman in the painting was more than she could stand. "Are you affected as well?" Denise asked, only to be met by a blank stare from Jessie. A few moments later, her unborn child, kicking wildly, stirred Jessie back to life. "We have to destroy the book," Denise said. Jessie shook her head. "She will take us all with her." Denise slammed her hand down on the book before Jessie could open it. "That's exactly what she wants you to think. But trust me, Jessie's unborn baby kicked so hard that she gasped. I can't help you. I'll take care of it," Denise said, taking the book and leaving the library. Denise counted herself lucky that the tiny library was on a small tropical island with an active volcano. It would only take her half a day to get to the volcano cone, light the book on fire, and drop it into the liquid lava below. She only hoped that would be enough. As she moved toward the volcano, the book and the demon it contained recognized her intent. "Hand over that book," the huge Polynesian man standing in her way said, his gun drawn. On some level, Denise knew that the man was under the influence of the demon. She ran around him and felt the bullet from his gun rip through the ruined blouse and on through her right shoulder. By the time she reached the trail at the edge of the volcano, she could feel the demon trying to stop her. Branches and thorns reached out for her, only to rip more holes in her ruined blouse as she ran toward the summit. Finally, she reached the edge of the cauldron and the bubbling lava below. "No!" The sound of the wind and the rush of the heat shouted as the edges of the book began to smoke. The book burst into flames as she tossed the book toward the lava. It hung suspended above the lava, flaming bigger and brighter, but without being consumed. Suddenly, she noticed that the young girl she'd seen before had caught up to her. "It's drawing power from your blouse." Denise shook her head. None of this made sense. The blouse had taken the brunt of the damage inflicted on her and was ragged and full of holes. "You have to destroy the blouse as well," the girl said, before racing away from the lip. At the bottom of the trail, she saw the other children blocking the way of the adults who were under the influence of the book. Denise turned to see flame explode from the book and realized that she had no choice. If destroying the blouse didn't work, she would have to offer herself to the volcano. But this glimmer of hope had given her a reason to live. She pulled the remains of that ruined blouse off and threw it down at the boiling lava below. The atmosphere around the book howled in rage as the blouse fluttered to the surface of the lava and then burst into flames. The book exploded, scattering burning ash over everything. Before Denise could react, the same young girl was pulling her away from the lip of the cauldron. She stumbled into the group and children, and then her world went black. Denise remembered that blouse as the one that the artist had insisted she wear while he worked on the painting. What happened after that was a blur until that book exploded over the cauldron. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes to the soft light of the sun coming in through the curtains of a cottage near the ocean. It was a dream, she thought, until she realized that she wasn't wearing the blouse anymore. The painting and the book had been destroyed, but she didn't know about the curse. She inspected her body and then wrapped a sheet around her till she could find some clothes. Denise opened the door and saw children playing in front of the cottage, then stepped onto the porch and noticed a thorny bush near the steps into the yard. She idly pricked her finger and gave a sigh of relief as she realized that the curse was gone when a tiny drop of blood formed on her finger. "The children told us how you saved us," Jessie said as she approached from the side yard. Denise shrugged. "I needed to be free of the curse," Jess smiled. "The children like having you around, and we are in the market for school teacher." Denise had never considered anything like this. She'd been so young when the nightmare started. She looked down. Her body was still young, and if the kids had trusted her, maybe she could try. It beats modeling, she thought, as she followed Jessie back toward the cottage. The chromatic drought. Detective Marcus Sign squinted at the fading landscape through his office window. Another day, another shade of gray, lost to whatever this phenomenon was. The sky no longer held its azure expanse, just a flat, pale ceiling hanging lifelessly above a world growing increasingly two-dimensional. 3 more reports of rivers running dry in the Eastern District, Officer Palmer said, dropping a thin file onto Sane's desk. And the hospitals reporting 17 new cases of what they're calling chromatic dehydration. Sign nodded grimly. The medical examiner had shown him the bodies last week. Skin paper thin, organs collapsed inward, as if someone had extracted not just the water, but the very substance from them. Their eyes, once spherical, had flattened to perfect circles, staring out from faces that resembled pencil sketches more than human remains. "Any pattern to where it's spreading?" Sign asked, though he already knew the answer. "None that makes sense," Palmer replied. "It's jumping between neighborhoods, between people who've never met. The only consistent thing is that once it starts in an area, everything there loses dimension within 72 hours. Sign turned away from the window. His own hands seemed less substantial today, the knuckles less pronounced, the veins no longer raised beneath his skin. He'd taken to pressing his palms against solid objects throughout the day, reassuring himself that he could still feel texture, still interact with a three-dimensional world. "What about the library research?" he asked. Palmer's expression darkened. "Archives are becoming affected. Books are losing their ink, words disappearing from pages even as people try to read them. This was worse than Sane had feared. Knowledge itself was being drained from the world. The river had been the first to go in Westbrook. Once a vibrant, blue-green artery cutting through the heart of the city, it had faded to a pale, silvery streak before disappearing entirely, leaving only a shallow depression in the ground where water had flowed for centuries. Sine stood in the dry riverbed, feeling the cracked earth beneath his shoes. It didn't feel like drought. There was no sense of moisture having evaporated. Rather, it was as if the concept of river had been partially erased from reality, leaving behind this ghostly impression. Detective Sine, a woman, approached him, her white lab coat nearly indistinguishable from the colorless landscape. Dr. Eliza Tanner, the city's leading physicist, had been studying the phenomenon since its first appearance 3 months ago. "The process is accelerating," she said without preamble. "We've been measuring the dimensional collapse, and what took weeks in the beginning is now happening in days." "How long?" Sine asked. "Until complete two-dimensionality? For the entire planet?" She shrugged, the gesture oddly truncated, as if her shoulders couldn't quite complete their full range of motion. "At the current rate? 2 weeks, maybe less." Sine swallowed. "And then what?" "I don't know," Dr. Tanner admitted. "But I found something you should see." The university's rare book collection had been moved to a secure facility once the libraries began to empty. Dr. Tanner led Sine through rows of glass cases containing ancient texts, their pages increasingly blank as the phenomenon progressed. "Most of our oldest manuscripts are already gone," she explained. "But this one is different." She stopped before a small display containing what appeared to be a journal bound in matte black leather. Unlike the other books, whose pages had turned a uniform white, this one's text remained stubbornly visible, though the letters seemed to shift and rearrange themselves whenever Sane tried to focus on them. "It's resisting the effect," Dr. Tanner said. "And more importantly, it appeared in our collection the day the river began to fade. No record of acquisition, no catalog entry. It was simply there." Sine leaned closer. "Can you translate it?" "Portions. It appears to be a record kept by something called the Society of Final Memory. From what I can decipher, they were an ancient order dedicated to preserving knowledge through catastrophic events." "Preserving knowledge?" "But everything's being erased." Dr. Tanner's fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her glasses. A gesture Sine noticed seemed less three-dimensional than it should have been. "I think they made a mistake," she whispered. A terrible one. The journal led them to the underground chambers beneath the old cathedral. Sign had never known these catacombs existed, though they appeared to have been built centuries before the church itself. The society maintained outposts throughout the world, Dr. Tanner explained, as they descended the narrow stairs, flashlight beams cutting through dust that hung motionless in the air. According to the journal, they believed humanity was cyclical, civilizations rising and falling in patterns, with crucial knowledge lost in each collapse. So they preserved information across these cycles? Sign asked, ducking beneath a low archway. The stone felt wrong beneath his fingers, too smooth, as if the grain and texture were being slowly erased. Yes, but more than that, they developed a method to intentionally reset civilization if they deemed it necessary, a way to erase dangerous knowledge while preserving what they considered essential wisdom. The stairway opened into a vast circular chamber. At its center stood a pedestal holding what appeared to be an obsidian sphere, the only object Soin had seen in weeks that still possessed a sense of depth and dimension. Surrounding it, slumped against the walls and floor, were desiccated bodies, or rather, what remained of them. They resembled paper cutouts more than corpses, flattened and colorless. The last active members of the society, Dr. Tanner murmured. They activated the device, the mnemonic purge, they called it. But something went wrong. Sign approached the sphere cautiously. Unlike everything else in this fading world, it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A perfect three-dimensional void amid the increasingly two-dimensional reality. The journal says the purge was meant to be selective, Dr. Tanner continued, her voice growing thinner, less substantial. To remove specific knowledge while leaving the fundamental structure of reality intact. But they miscalculated. Instead of erasing dangerous information, they started erasing the fundamental properties of existence: dimension, color, substance. And now it's spreading like a contagion throughout reality. Sign reached toward the sphere, feeling a strange pull. Can it be reversed? The journal wasn't clear, but Dr. Tanner's words cut off abruptly. Sign turned to find her frozen in place, her form suddenly flat against the wall, like a photograph. Her mouth was open in mid-sentence, but no sound emerged. Before his eyes, her image seemed to lose resolution, details blurring until she resembled a rough sketch more than a person. Dr. Tanner! He reached for her, but his hand passed through where her shoulder should have been. She wasn't just flat. She was becoming insubstantial. Sign turned back to the sphere in horror. The loss of dimensionality was accelerating. He could feel it in his own body, his lungs laboring to expand in 3 dimensions when reality only permitted 2. His vision narrowing as his eyeballs flattened into circles. The journal had described the purge as a reset, a way to begin civilization anew. But this wasn't renewal. This was erasure, with the last of his dimensional strength. Sane grasped the obsidian sphere. It burned cold against his palms, the sensation almost nostalgic, a reminder of when touch had depth and texture. If the society had started this, perhaps their tool could end it. The sphere pulsed beneath his touch, and Sane had the distinct sensation of something ancient and aware turning its attention toward him. Not a machine, but an entity, a consciousness that had been waiting, perhaps for centuries, for someone to recognize the terrible mistake. "You understand," a voice whispered directly into his mind. The cycle was corrupted, the purge incomplete. "How do I stop it?" Sane gasped, feeling his vocal cords flattening, his words becoming as thin as paper. The purge cannot be stopped, but it can be completed correctly. The sphere began to glow with an impossible light. Not white, or any color Sign could name, but something that suggested all colors at once, dimensions beyond the three he knew. "Choose what remains," the voice commanded. "What essence of your world must survive to build anew?" Sign understood then. The society hadn't intended to destroy reality, but to curate it, to select which elements would survive the transition to the next cycle. Their failure had been one of judgment, not mechanism. As his consciousness expanded into the sphere, Sayin saw the entirety of his fading world. Every person, place, and memory collapsing into flatness. And beyond that, he glimpsed other worlds, other cycles, stretching back through countless iterations of humanity. With his final three-dimensional thought, Sane made his choice. "Hey, Jimmy, you still reading that comic?" Mrs. Abernathy called from behind the drugstore counter. "Those new Detective Sane stories are all black and white. Now that the war's on, not much to look at." 12-year-old Jimmy Marshall didn't look up from the final panels of Detective Sane and the mystery of the vanishing world. He traced his finger over the stark black and white illustrations, the flattened city, the mysterious sphere, the hero's final choice. "I don't mind, Mrs. Abernathy," he replied. "The story's better than the colors, anyway." He turned to the last page, where Detective Sign stood before a newly dimensional world, color bleeding back into the edges of the panel as rivers began to flow again and people regained their solid forms. The final caption read, "And so Sign chose to preserve not knowledge or power, but the capacity for dimension itself, the ability to grow, to change, to become more than flat impressions on a finite page." Jimmy closed the comic carefully. Outside the shop window, a military convoy rumbled past, headed for the docks, and then across the Atlantic. The world was at war, resources were scarce, and luxuries like colored ink for comics were among the first casualties on the home front. But as he stepped outside into the April sunshine, Jimmy couldn't help seeing the world a little differently, noticing the subtle depths and dimensions that existed even in the harshest of times, the colors that persisted even when they couldn't be printed on a page. He tucked the comic securely under his arm and headed home, unaware that in his hands he carried one of the last remaining artifacts of a civilization that had faded not once, but countless times before, each cycle preserved paradoxically within the flat, two-dimensional pages of a story that refused to be forgotten. So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.